You have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something. Your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever.
Stay hungry.
Hungry. Foolish. Stay hungry, stay foolish.
This is the eCommerce All-Stars podcast, brought to you with heart by Nadimo.com.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining today's podcast with your host, Brandon Moskwa, of course. And today I'm excited because I have Trent Dyrsmid on the line. Trent is a serial entrepreneur, a husband, and a father. His 3 private companies generate millions a year in revenue, and Profit Magazine named Trent's first company one of Canada's Profit 100 fastest growing companies for 2 years in a row. So thanks for joining us today, Trent.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, Brandon.
Well, and it's a pleasure to have you on the show. I think it's going to be a great show today. Today we're going to talk a lot about Amazon wholesaling. Before we jump right into that, I mean, I gave a quick high-level intro on you, but I'd love if you could just kind of let people know a little bit more about yourself and what you've done in the world of e-commerce.
Sure, happy to. So I'm a Canadian, although I do live in the United States now, and I started my first company in Vancouver, British Columbia, way back in 2001. That was the company that was ranked as one of Canada's Profit 100 fastest growing companies for a couple of years in a row before I sold it in 2008. And that was really kind of like my executive MBA in business, as it were. I learned so many valuable lessons in that business, and probably the biggest one was the importance of having documented systems and processes in my business. After selling it, I moved to California and spent some time surfing and riding my dirt bike and enjoying a mini retirement, as it were. And then during that period of time, I met an individual while I was surfing, and she was quite successful at making her living online. And I became very fascinated with that idea. And have spent the last 9 years honing my skills in that particular area. And for the last 2 years, I have been solely dedicated to e-commerce, in particular to the Amazon wholesale model. And we've been fortunate to have quite a bit of success in that area. We went from zero to over $100,000 a month in revenue in our first 5 months. We now regularly do about $250,000 a month in revenue, and we just keep on growing the business. And I think the thing that I've become a little bit well known for in this particular space is the systems and process guy. That's one of the reasons why the business grew so quickly. And it's also one of the major reasons why I was actually able to delegate myself out of a job in that business in less than 12 months. I still oversee operations, but I don't actually have any active day-to-day roles. And that frees me up to start other businesses, which I have 2 more that are on the go and in the infancy stage.
Very cool. Actually, I'm on your website right now, brightideas.co, and right at the very front, says started Amazon August 2016. Number 2, 100K per month in 5 months. Number 3, delegated myself out in less than 12 months. And number 4, I don't sell training courses. So I think that's really quite powerful, actually, what's right there. And I'd love to talk to you. I would love to have you on a call for an entire day and talk to you about all of this. But obviously, we're on a podcast. So we're limited in time. And initially, when I talked to you, I said, well, let's talk about how to build and scale a Amazon wholesale business. So I'd love to jump into that, but more from, like you said, the process and procedures perspective, because a lot of people want to go out there, start up an e-commerce store or anything in online, for lack of a better word. And the process and procedures is something that I really hold close to myself as well. And I think they're the most important pieces to success as far as I'm concerned. And you're being a process and procedure guy who's done it and done well at it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. So before we answer that, let me just talk about why I picked the Amazon wholesale model, because if you have listeners who are thinking that, hey, I'd really like to have an e-commerce business, it's really it's important to understand there's a lot of options. And the reason I was kind of struggling trying to do what's called private label on Amazon, and I'd only been doing it for about 3 or 4 months before I discovered that wholesale even existed. And when I compare the two, wholesale is just so much less risk. And even compared to starting with your own brand and your own site, it's just so much less risk, and it's so much quicker to generate cash flow. And the reason for that is simple. With your own brand, whether it be on your own site or on Amazon, you're kind of starting from scratch. You've got no traction, no product credibility, no brand reputation, no customers, no reviews, no traffic, no list, no nothing. And that is a very tall wall to climb. It's not impossible, obviously, but it's difficult. Whereas with wholesale, what we do is we simply we use software to analyze literally thousands and thousands of products that are on the Amazon marketplace. And we look for products that possess the attributes that are desirable to us. And one of those key attributes is that they have a track record of sales. And then we reach out to the brand and attempt to establish a relationship with that brand to become ideally one of their semi-exclusive or co-exclusive or even exclusive sellers of their products on the Amazon marketplace. So the reason that particular model is so low risk is when I buy inventory, I don't have any risk that it's not going to sell, because that product that I'm buying from that US manufacturer already has this long track record of being really popular. It's got a great sales rank. It's got probably an average or decent product listing. It's already got reviews. So I don't have to spend money giving away product and all this money on pay-per-click and so forth. And that is, especially for people who are starting out, the worst thing in the world you can do, especially if you have a limited amount of capital, is lose it on your first swing at bat, because then you don't get another swing. And that's awful. So that's why I picked the wholesale model. It's worked out very, very well for us because of the fact that right from the get-go, when I looked at all of the grunt work that was necessary to find the products, put them into spreadsheets, do some analysis, figure out what our potential profit per product was, figure out who the company behind that product was, figure out who the individual at that company was, figure out their contact information, and then send them an email. That's a lot of work. And what made us successful was I figured out, well, if I documented every single step of all of the parts of what I just described, and then I was able to outsource each of the steps to a virtual assistant in the Philippines where they were happily working for $2 to $3 an hour, that was going to enable me to send a lot more emails for a lot more products to a lot more potential suppliers than I otherwise could if I was just doing all that on my own. And that worked out exceedingly well.
That's interesting, because I had actually heard, there was a podcast recently I was listening to that talked about the importance of virtual assistants and that sort of thing. But the problem with virtual assistants is that not the problem with them, but the problem that people face is that they haven't documented all of their steps. And so they get frustrated because they're being asked a number of questions, or they just can't seem to, or, there's that communication gap somewhere. And I mean, that doesn't matter if it's Philippines or somebody across the street, in my opinion. Most of the time, it's just haven't properly documented the steps for everybody. Or like you said, you broke those down by each individual task, and it sounds like you outsourced each of those individual tasks to individuals.
I did.
Yeah, that's excellent. Now I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit more. What were some of your successes and failures in doing that portion of the process?
So we didn't really, it was all, I don't want to sound like we never make mistakes, because I make lots of mistakes, but in this particular area, it worked exceedingly well right from the get-go. And that was why within 5 months, we were doing over $100,000 a month, because it wasn't if you think about it logically, and I'm a very pragmatic right brain or left brain, whatever the logic brain is, I think that's I don't even know which side it is, but anyway, I'm a very logical person.
Right.
And I have a process oriented mind. And so that served me very well in this regard. And I simply looked at, okay, well, what's the first thing that needs to happen? Well, the first thing that needs to happen is you need to find products. And so there are tools that allow you to do that very easily. One way of doing it is you can look for existing Amazon sellers and look at the products they sell and try and source those products. Or you can perform keyword searches using a tool called Price Checker 2. And that will, again, retrieve a list of products that meet the criteria or that come back for that particular keyword. So we kind of call that the high level finding potential products step. And I just literally thought it through. Well, what's the first thing I need to do? Okay. What's the next thing I need to do? All right. What's the next thing I need to do? And I just wrote highly detailed instructions full of screenshots with big red arrows. So there was literally no way to misinterpret the instructions. The biggest thing that people do wrong when they're trying to outsource tasks is they're in a hurry and they're vague. And if you don't have time to document the process correctly the first time around, you're going to spend a whole bunch more time answering questions from your virtual assistants because they won't understand. You will have left gaps. Think of it like a treasure map. A treasure map, if you want to find the treasure, it has to literally have every last instruction. Walk 3 steps, go to this tree. You'll know it's the right tree because it's green. There's a red rock beside it. The rock's on the right-hand side. It's 6 inches tall, and it casts a shadow over a small little book. I'm kind of being a bit silly. Yeah. But that level of detail is what is required for a successful, we call them standard operating procedures. You can call it a business process, whatever word you like. I just like SOP. So I did that for step 1. And then, okay, so then step 2 was using this software to extract the products. Well, just like the first step, there's a whole bunch of steps and procedures to get exactly correct so that the outcome is exactly what you want. And then we had to take all of those leads that would end up in a spreadsheet. We had to perform math on each and every row of the spreadsheet. And we would do the same thing over week after week after week after week. So high volumes of analysis. And on any given week, we would have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, maybe even 1,000 or more rows in these spreadsheets. And so I made a spreadsheet template that had the math formulas in the right columns to be able to, as soon as a virtual assistant pasted the data in the empty columns, then because those numbers now populated, the formulas that I'd created in the other columns would automatically do the math and would show us definitively in a certain cell on every single row the exact amount of potential profit that product would generate for us if we could successfully source it at a guesstimate of the price that we needed to source it at. And we just kind of would have a rule of thumb. Well, if I could make a 15% gross margin, which is just part of the math formula, then I'd need to pay, this price. And if I could, then this product would make me $300 a month or $2,000 a month or whatever the number was. So now you've got this spreadsheet full of thousands or hundreds of rows, and maybe out of those, maybe like 50 rows or 100 rows or 200 rows, some percentage of the total number of products that are in that sheet, they're going to meet our criteria. Well, now we need to contact the brands for all of those products. So we try and do this between 200 to 300 times a week, 200 to 300 potential products every single week. And then all of those leads, we call them leads, have to go into our CRM, and we use HubSpot for that. And then we need to send emails. So there's another documented process for how to get all those leads into HubSpot in exactly the right way, because there's all sorts of information that we want to store in the various fields in HubSpot. And then there's yet another written procedure for how we're going to get all the contact information for all those people, which would have happened obviously before we imported them into HubSpot. There's another written procedure for how we're going to send out those 200 to 300 emails with all the right information to all the right people. And then there's another written procedure for how we're going to handle all the replies that we get from sending out those 300 emails, and so on and so on and so on. And that's, so we're just talking about product sourcing right now, but we literally have written procedures for every area of the business, because if you don't have them, then the wheels, when you're trying to do things at the scale that we're trying to do, to grow at the rate that we're trying to grow at, eventually the wheels just fall off and it becomes this huge mess and you drown.
Well, exactly. I could see it drowning very quickly if you don't have all of those processes documented, especially when you're talking about 200 to 300 products a week. I mean, that's quite a load.
It is.
Yeah. So,
but you need to do that many to be successful, because it's very competitive, and you need to get enough wins. And to do that, I like to say the quality is in the quantity. If you send enough emails, or you reach, not even just email, if you just reach out to enough suppliers, you will, by the law of averages, find a certain number of them that are open to the message that you're conveying. And then that's when a discussion happens, and ultimately an agreement gets signed as a result of that, or that's the goal.
So I'm just going to circle back to the beginning there, when you said why you chose the wholesale model. And kind of, in a way, one of the questions that keeps popping into my head was, you're looking at all these products and whatnot, and I mean, there's your whole processes, obviously, which was very, very interesting to listen to. And you're talking about all the different processes that are in place, and a lot of that is siphoning through existing products that are being sold on Amazon. Did I hear you correctly there?
Yep. I spend unlike, say, in private label, where you might spend hours and hours and hours doing product research. I don't do any of that. My team doesn't do any of that. We simply just do this in a mass production fashion using the software.
Right. Now, what you had mentioned, though, too, with the wholesale business model, where I'm confused is how it's different wholesale model versus like what I would consider a resale business model, because you're essentially reselling products that are already available on Amazon, are you not?
That is correct. Yes, but there's a key thing to understand. So wholesale and resale are probably somewhat synonymous. It's probably the same thing, really. The products are already on Amazon. They're already being sold by other sellers on Amazon. What we look for are products with deficiencies that we can fix. Things like maybe their price has been quite unstable. Maybe maybe the brand has unauthorized sellers. Maybe there are map violations. Maybe it's not a very good listing. Maybe none of the current sellers are running pay-per-click campaigns. Maybe none of the current sellers are bothering to respond to negative product reviews. All of those things are issues that are impairing the performance of that brand on Amazon. And so we come along kind of as the Amazon doctor, as it were. And we say, look, here's all the symptoms of your sickness. Did you even know about all of these things? Are you concerned about these things? Are you concerned about how map violations on Amazon are affecting your relationships in brick and mortar retail? And they are every single time. The brand is super concerned about that, but they don't necessarily know how to fix it. And we say, if you'll authorize us to become one of a very short list of sellers, ideally 2 or less, we will work with you to kick off all the other sellers, who, especially the unauthorized ones. And then you can make decisions about, if you have authorized sellers, about eliminating their ability to sell on Amazon. And the goal is to have us become, like I say, one of just 2 or fewer authorized sellers. And in doing so, we completely avoid the number one problem on Amazon for resale sellers, and that's the race to the bottom. We don't have any race to the bottom on the products that we sell, because unless the brands sign an agreement with us, we won't buy the product from them.
Right. Yeah, so then there's no race to the bottom. That you essentially eliminate that right away, because you're more or less cutting out all of the problem cases and basically cutting yourself right to the top.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
And so that's why I love it, because you get this, when you should get a relationship signed, there's no race to the bottom. So your margins are highly predictable. Your cash flow is highly predictable, and you have basically zero risk because the product's already a strong seller. Like where's the error? Where's the rock that hits you in the face in that scenario? There really isn't one.
No. Now what you just talked about is there's obviously quite a lot of initial work, like you said, and the 200 to 300 products a week and that sort of thing, and the law of averages. All of that is very, very important, and that's exactly why you need all those processes and procedures in place. Obviously, otherwise it just would not work. And so it's not something that someone would just pick up and just try. They have to really be dedicated to that overall process, and they have to understand all what you just spoke about with the regards to map violations and how you can improve the product listings and these types of things to basically become the Amazon doctor for these companies.
That is correct. To be successful in any business,
yes.
you have to be really, really good. You can't just kind of wing it and kind of suck and think that you're just going to accidentally become successful. And I'm not just referring to just an Amazon business. This applies to any business. We are in a developed economy with a high level of competition for every business, for every customer, in every industry, in every niche. And if you're just kind of winging it, you're not going to be successful. That's just how it is.
Yeah.
And it saddens me when, I see people come in to this space and they have unrealistic expectations. They're like, well, I'll just kind of do this part-time, and maybe I'm not going to have even a really great website, or, well, I'll just kind of do all the work myself because I'm not willing to invest in a virtual assistant. You might as well just keep watching TV, because that's not going to work.
Yeah, exactly. Or continue to listen to podcasts and not actually listen to actually take action in the proper form. Because I agree with you entirely on that, and I've had other people on the show as well talk about the same. And their example was or one of their examples was, you're not going to open up your own retail store, for example. Just to go open up a location, put some product in it, and only go into work every once in a while.
Like, who would do that?
Yeah, exactly. You have to be dedicated, and you have to be willing to work and put in the effort, and you have to know what you're doing. You can't just go ahead and wing it. And I agree. It does sadden me as well with the unrealistic expectations, and most particularly when you talk about expectations, I'm talking about the people just want to live the lifestyle, have a wonderful lifestyle and not have to put in the effort. Now that said, you've like you said, one of the things that you've said very many times is that you've essentially been able to delegate yourself out of the role. But just to be very clear to people, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but the reason you delegated yourself out of the role was, well, how you did it was like you talked about, by documenting and taking a lot of upfront work and making that processitized. I don't even know the proper word there, but so that you can get those proper people in place to do this on a mass production level, so to speak. And then secondly, what you did is now your time is freed up so that you're able to continue to build other businesses. And that sort of thing. And that's what really attracted me to wanting to have you on the call, because it's not a matter of, okay, I'm just living the lifestyle. I did one thing and got a little lucky with it, or something like that. It shows the hard work and the procedures you put in place, and all of those types of things that are absolutely essential to becoming not only a profitable business person, but somebody who obviously knows what they're doing. So I commend you on that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, in the beginning, I was the head guy in charge of product sourcing. So not only did I write all the procedures and hire all the VAs, but I would sit at my desk for 8 hours or more every single day, dealing with the replies to all these hundreds of emails that I'd sent, analyzing price lists, calling brands, having discussions, getting my VAs to fill out the account applications. Like, it was just this treadmill of highly repetitive but absolutely critical activity. And I personally took us to over $100,000. And then I thought, all right, now I've got some cash flow.
Right.
And I don't want to do this job anymore. So I'm going to hire somebody else to do this job. And I'm going to give them all my procedures, and I'm going to train them so that I can replace myself in this role. And so that's how you start building a team. And then you just do that over and over and over. My belief for a CEO is I have this little expression called CTOD, CTODD. My job is to create, test, optimize, document, and delegate. Not do. Not do. My job is not do. There's no D for do in that scenario. Yeah, initially when I'm testing and optimizing, I'm doing a lot of doing. But my goal is always to fire myself from the doing. I like working on my businesses, not in them. And I think any good CEO will work on their businesses. Like on my podcast, the other day, I interviewed this guy by the name of Josh Kent, who's the founder of Sunfrog, which is the largest t-shirt platform on planet Earth. In his second year, he exceeded 100 million in sales, and now he owns some share of 18 companies. Do you think that he works in any of those companies? No, not a snowball's chance in hell. And do you think that his team has documented procedures that he oversees to a certain degree in all of those businesses? Yeah, absolutely. And do you think that he has key performance indicators that he holds his team accountable to? Yeah, absolutely. Because that's what the job of the CEO is. In the beginning, yeah, you got to do it. You got to roll up your sleeves and do it. But you have to go into it with a mindset of how fast can I fire myself? And what do I need to be able to fire myself?
Very, very interesting. I think that's actually a great place to leverage into my last question, which is, I mean, there's a million other questions I would love to ask you, but I think in the interest of time and whatnot, I'm going to ask the final question, which is, do you have any parting words of wisdom, and how can people get a hold of you?
Sure. So the easiest way to get a hold of me is just go to brightideas.co. If you become a subscriber, reply to an email, because I'll reply back, because that's what I do. And then words of wisdom. There's so many. I mean, if you're into e-commerce and you're an employee still and you want to build an e-commerce business, I would strongly recommend you have a look at the wholesale model, but know that you're going to need to invest money to make it successful. You won't, if you're still an employee, you won't have enough time to do everything yourself. It's just not going to work. So you're going to need to either develop systems or buy systems. We sell ours. You're going to need to use many of the software tools that we pay to use. You're going to need to hire virtual assistants, because if you think that you can just, take an hour a day in your spare time after your first job stops or whatever and make some calls, then you're going to be successful, you're dreaming. It's not going to work. So if you don't have the fun, and also you have to have the money to be able to buy inventory, or you have to have the credit or credit cards available to be able to buy the inventory. Now, thankfully, Amazon has this wonderful little thing called Amazon Lending, and which you become eligible for after a year of sales. And the last time they offered us a loan was like $600,000. Amazon will throw more money at you than you can possibly ever spend on inventory, but you got to at least get to that level. And so you've got to look at it. Like you said, nobody goes and opens a retail store and sits in it for an hour a day and then goes home and watches TV and hopes to be successful. That is just, it's just ridiculous to think that would work. So you have to bring that same mindset into this business or whatever business that you choose. And if you don't do that, you're just deluding yourself and probably wasting a lot of money in the process.
Very, very, very great words of wisdom, actually, and very well said. I appreciate that, Trent. And like you said, you mentioned to people how they can get a hold of you. And I'll be honest, one thing you mentioned there, which I love, is if they sign up for your mailing list and they reply to an email that's sent, that you answer that back. I've done that to a lot of people where I just reply back to their general email, almost as a test in a way.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, you get a reply back from the person who's, who supposedly sent it, because they're obviously, a lot of those are automated. But when you get an actual reply back from that person, I think just shows so much about the individual as well. Because I think it's important. And one thing I didn't talk to you about today was just relationship building. And that's a small piece of relationship building, and not from the standpoint that we would have discussed it. But, you just have to be personable with people in this world, and just sitting behind your computer and letting everything be automated is one thing, but you still have to be a person, and have to be willing to reply to people and that sort of thing. And so
you do. And something I want to add to that is if you're on the other side of the coin, if you're the person writing to people like you or writing to people like me, you need to be aware that we do get a lot of emails. So if you're writing me a 7-paragraph long email, chances are I'm not going to reply, because you've not been respectful of my time. Because if everyone sent me these huge long emails with all these questions, how on earth would I ever have time to run my business, which I get paid for, and then answer all the emails for free, which I don't get paid for? Obviously, it wouldn't work. So if you're going to write to someone who has an audience, and who probably has several thousand or maybe tens of thousands of subscribers on their list, make sure that you keep your questions short and to the point, and then you're really stacking the odds in your favor that they're going to take a moment to give you an answer.
Thank you very, very much, Trent, for being on the show. It was a great show and a lot of information packed into it. I really appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
You have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something. Your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever.
Stay hungry.
Hungry. Foolish. Stay hungry. Stay foolish.
This is the eCommerce All-Stars podcast, brought to you with heart by Nadimo.com.